Welcome back to The Explainer. So today, we're basically turning our deep dive into the hidden psychology of tattoo refusal into an official Psych 101 exam review session. I mean, we live in a world where permanent ink is practically the cultural default, right? So what exactly makes someone say, yeah, no thanks? You've probably noticed that some people flat out refuse tattoos, even when literally everyone around them is getting them. And the source data shows they don't hate art, they aren't judging anybody else. They just know for an absolute fact they never want something permanent on their own skin. Well, psychology tells us this simple preference actually reveals some incredibly fascinating personality patterns. So let's unpack them. Okay, let's quickly glance at the syllabus for today. Section 1 covers control and fluid identity. Section 2 dives into regret and body preservation. Section 3 is all about independence and internal meaning. And finally, Section 4 is our master final exam review table. All right, part 1, control and fluid identity. Let's pull out our first flashcard and look at the fundamental concepts of personal control and how we view our evolving selves. So, our very first trait is a strong need for control. We're defining this as the psychological discomfort with irreversible choices and the loss of flexibility that comes with them. A tattoo is literally the ultimate permanent marker. And to certain minds, permanence equates directly to a loss of agency. A permanent mark completely removes the option to change, adjust, or undo a decision forever. It locks you into a choice that you made in a single fleeting moment. People who highly value control are driven by these key motivations: to keep their life options as wide open as possible. They desperately want the power to adjust their course. Just think about how often we change our minds about, say, our favorite movies, our style, or even our entire career paths. Well, for these individuals, a permanent tattoo fundamentally disrupts that deeply rooted need to keep things flexible. They literally experience profound discomfort with permanence. They absolutely need the option to hit undo. Okay, moving to our next trait, fluid identity. Now, this isn't just simple indecision. It's actually defined as the belief that your personal identity is constantly evolving rather than just staying static over time. It's a pretty profound philosophical stance on the self, really. Folks who refuse tattoos often ask the exact same insightful question: what if I become a completely different person later? They see their identity as a moving target, not some fixed point on a map. So they actively resist picking a permanent symbol for what might honestly just be a temporary phase of life. Because, let's be real, the person you are at 25 might have absolutely nothing in common with the person you become at 50. The core motivations here are that overarching fear of misrepresenting a future self and a deep, ingrained understanding that our passions, beliefs, and values are always going to evolve. Time for a quick pop quiz transition. We've covered control and identity, but what exactly happens when our brains overanalyze the future, or when we strictly view the physical body as a natural baseline? Let's pivot to our next set of psychological drivers regarding foresight and physical boundaries. Part 2, regret and body preservation. Let's crack open our notes and look at the intense psychology behind high regret sensitivity and the deeply rooted concept of bodily preservation. So, how do these minds process regret? Well, high sensitivity to regret is a mental framework where the mere possibility of future disappointment intensely outweighs present excitement. Psychology shows us that some minds just replay bad decisions way more intensely than the rest of us. They aren't just casually considering the future, they're thinking strictly long-term, basically calculating the odds of a change of heart down the road. A major key takeaway to jot down in your notes: they literally imagine future disappointment before they make a choice today. Because their brains heavily replay past mistakes, the fear of future regret holds significantly more weight than the temporary joy of getting inked. Their motivations include this intense rumination on past errors and a heavy, almost exclusive focus on long-term outcomes. The thrill of right now just cannot override the potential disappointment of tomorrow. Next up on our flashcards is body preservation. This is the psychological view of the physical body as a natural entity that is meant to be maintained rather than permanently modified. For these folks, putting a permanent mark on the body feels deeply and psychologically intrusive. When we look at their motivations, they view the body as something to maintain naturally. And it's super important to note, this is a protective baseline, not a fear. They might be incredibly eager to experiment by changing their hairstyle, updating their wardrobe, or totally shifting their daily routine, but they restrict their comfort entirely to those temporary changes. Altering their natural baseline state forever, that crosses a hard psychological line. It creates this lingering feeling that something purely natural has been irrevocably altered. So, we understand regret and the body as a baseline. But what happens when the pressure to get a tattoo comes heavily from society, from prevailing trends, or from a desire to showcase memories? Let's pivot to our final two behavioral traits, which focus on how these individuals interact with social norms. Part 3, Independence and Internal Meaning. Let's see how they navigate external social pressure and manage internal emotional meaning. Here, we're looking at the resistance to social pressure. Basically, this is an instinctive psychological drive to make decisions completely independently. It means actively avoiding trends simply because so many others are following them. Tattoos are often tied to trends or social identity, right? But for these highly independent individuals, the more common a societal trend becomes, the less interested they actually feel in jumping on the bandwagon. The motivations driving this independence are incredibly clear. It's an active avoidance of trend following, a desire to disconnect personal choices from a broad social identity, and a really deep-seated need for completely independent decision-making. Refusing tattoos in a culture where everyone has them actually reflects a powerful psychological need to boldly assert independent choice. They instinctively resist flying with the flock just because everyone else is doing it. All right, let's move to our final trait and see how this builds on the idea of keeping deeply personal life stories totally private. Preference for internal meaning is the tendency to process important memories, pain, love, or beliefs inwardly rather than needing to display them externally. While a lot of people use tattoos as this beautiful outward expression of their journey, the motivations for internal processing show that these individuals keep their emotions and beliefs strictly private. They just don't have the desire to wear their heart or their history on their sleeve. Psychologically, they process profound meaning on the inside. They find immense comfort in keeping their most important stories completely private and unseen by the rest of the world. Part 4, Final Exam Review Table. Okay, pencils ready? It is time to consolidate everything we've learned today into our master cheat sheet. You're definitely going to want to screenshot this. It's the ultimate summary of the 6 psychological drivers that explain why someone might actively refuse permanent ink. We've got the strong need for control, driven by a desire for flexibility, fluid identity, driven by an evolving self, regret sensitivity, fueled by long-term caution, body preservation, focused on maintaining a natural state, independence, pushing back against social trends, and finally, internal meaning, driven by a preference for inward emotional processing, all neatly summarized right here in our review table. Let's close out this explainer with an incredibly thought-provoking quote drawn straight from our source material today. Once you understand what small choices reveal about the mind, you start seeing people very differently. And that leaves us with a fascinating, profound question to chew on long after this review session officially ends. If a choice as simple as refusing a tattoo reveals so much about how someone views control, their evolving identity, and their deepest emotions, what other small choices in your life are secretly broadcasting the deepest parts of your own psychology? Thanks so much for joining this explainer. Keep studying those small choices,